But of course, that's not what's meant by the left. What do you think about...
No, it's not meant by anybody who hasn't been gobbling up right-wing demagogue propaganda on this issue.
And then science comes along and disproves the global warming theory.
Literally the opposite is true, right? You know? Like, it couldn't... This is as the opposite is true as you can get, right? It is hilarious too. They're like, the left are using language. The left is using language in a you know, dishonest, inflammatory way to push through their agenda. Also, abortion and murder are the same thing, and there are no reasons why we might think that they're not the same thing. All right, everybody. Do you want to know how you can work for the good of the nation? Do you want to know what you can do to help Donald Trump? Well, luckily, Publica has released Project 2025 training videos, you know? That thing that Donald Trump says he doesn't have anything to do with, even though, like, 70% of his cabinet are employees of Project 2025, you know? It is amazing how, you know, they're not totally unself-aware, right? They are a lot, like, they still think that, like, no, we can convince people that abortion is murder. But sometimes they have moments of lucidity, and they go like, well, it sure does seem that our policies are deeply unpopular amongst the majority of the public. So maybe we should distance ourselves from this insane autocratic agenda we have. But we're not going to fall for it. We're going to look at some of these training videos.
Hi, I'm Katie Sullivan, and just a normal American woman. But to the left, that makes me a cisgendered, ethno-imperialist, birthing person with pronouns she, her.
I wonder how many times she's encountered somebody on the left and they said that to her, you know? I'm willing to bet none, but it doesn't matter. This is all about driving moral panic, right? So whatever they have to say, they will.
Words like that are quite a mouthful, and it's one America needs to spit out before we choke on it.
By the way, you know, strategic message to anybody on the left. If you encounter a conservative, don't do that. Right? Don't tell them that. It's not helpful. Again, do I think that actually happened? Unlikely. If it did, whoever did that, you know, we got to be convincing people, right? You don't want to drive them into the arms of the right by telling them all that, you know.
In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle.
In America, we understand that a nation is only living as long as it is striving.
Only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger.
This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will...
I hate it when the when the Reds like claim it, like Lincoln as part of their like inheritance, you know? Like, you guys do realize like the Republicans were like the egalitarians of the time, right? Like, they were fighting against you, the equivalent of you in their time. That's what was happening. Like, the party flip did happen. You know, you guys don't get to like claim Lincoln as you know, your predecessor. Like you guys would have been arguing about how it's actually good for the slaves that they're slaves because they can't, you know, they don't have capacity for self-government or whatever.
Will prosper.
Whether we go forward together with courage or turn back to policies that weakened our economy, diminished our leadership in the world, America's future will be in your hands.
Bethany, are your children afraid of monsters in the attic or under the bed?
Yeah, they have been, but we always tell them that they do not exist.
Today we have...
They don't exist, guys. God does. What evidence do I have that explains that monsters don't exist and that God does? None. But just believe me.
news. There are monsters in Uncle Sam's attic.
It's the words, phrases, definitions that are used, which may look like one thing, but absolutely mean another. And it is scary.
During this training, we will identify the problem, discuss examples from our time in the federal government, as well as the 5 cross-cutting principles of the current administration. We will teach you how to unwind the words and phrases that have been so artfully layered into every document in the federal government. You can do this in...
Yeah, dude, conservatives, you know, never ones to, like, use language in a strange and inflammatory manner, you know, like when they call everybody to the left of, like, George W. Bush a Marxist. Or when the more, you know, like, ethno-nationalist of them, you know, blood and soil types say that, like, immigrants coming from South America is actually a white genocide. No disingenuous uses of language coming from the right nowadays, you know. That's all on us.
In any role at any level of seniority. This training will prepare you to make changes and fast. The left continually pivots and assaults definitions and phrases. They twist words and phrases to support subconscious acceptance of a philosophy that was rejected or is against the grain of human existence, like, what is a woman? Perhaps the most effective tool the left wields is their ability to engage in constant subliminal advertising through their narrative, words, and phrases. Marxism became socialism, then democratic socialism, and is now...
No. Those are all just 3 different things. And they always have been, you know? Again, you know, ineffectual to these two who, again, like, anybody to the right of, like, Jordan Peterson is basically a Stalinist, but, you know.
Represented by the terms social justice and equity. This is perhaps the most scary of all.
Katie, what brings to mind is the quote, "He who controls the language rules the world." It's attributed to Joseph Stalin and other tyrants. And George Orwell stated, "He who controls language controls culture." Even...
What did Orwell think about socialism? Democratic socialism. What did Orwell think about that? Oh, wow, guys. Another conservative who read George Orwell misinterpreted him and thinks that, like, he was talking to them.
And more, Hitler and others lived by the creed. If you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it. Without doubt, it's true. Language is a powerful and often controlling tool.
Career bureaucrats and the left are also using language to change culture and gain more and more authority, thereby upsetting the balance of power envisioned by our founding fathers. This, in essence, weaponized language against the American people.
This training is vital to you as a political appointee. If there's one thing you take from this training, it is to know when you start your job as a political appointee, every single word, phrase, and acronym must be vetted, and you must determine what implications every word has before publishing or moving forward with any official or internal document.
All right.
Hey guys, remember, this is coming from the people who, for years, have been, having a panic attack about the left is policing our language, The left are the ones who you can't even use words anymore, everything's racist and blah, 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 blah. And then what's their solution? Use the power of the state to fix it. Use the power of the state, to enforce the language use that we agree with.
So now that we have identified the problem, let's give the viewers a taste of what we saw in the Trump administration. Bethany and I were both part of a coordinated effort in the Trump administration focused on trying to take back hijacked language and definitions across the United States government and even at our engagements in the United Nations. From our experiences, we will teach you how to identify the left's progressive language, scrutinize career staff compositions for dangerous language, and how to combat their manipulative efforts, ensuring clarity of definition and conservative intention.
And there it is, right? It is amazing how often the right makes this weird, like they're so prone to, authoritarian tendencies that they're like, well, obviously the way we're using the language is the way everybody else has to use it. And if they aren't using it that way, it's wrong, Which is just not how language works, right? The words mean whatever the people are using them to mean. That's how it works, right? It's not the dictionary doesn't adjudicate meaning, it reports on usage. It reports on how the words are being used already, which it's the same thing with the Matt Walsh, what is a woman, right? It's well, it's whatever we're using it to mean. It's not, you're never gonna have conceptual categories meet necessary and sufficient features. That's not how human language works.
Bethany and I are going to give you some examples of what we mean by this need to always ensure clarity. But in no way are we able to foresee the future and anticipate how the progressive left.
Now, again, that's not to say that you can't have conceptual debates about language, right? You can have a debate about whether or not the word should be used this way, But of course, that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is we use the language correctly, and we're going to infiltrate the regulatory state to make sure everybody's using it to our standards, which are conservative ones.
Left will continue to co-opt even more words and definitions. We can tell you the words and phrases being used today, but by the time you enter the administration, these examples may be obsolete. This will help you spot crucial issue areas to pay close attention to. We do not know what they will be calling men and women by the time you begin your tenure with the administration.
Probably men and women, right? That's, how That's what we're saying. The left's thing has been to just broaden the category, right? But like, you know, men and women will still be men and women, you know? They couldn't have got some people with some more energy to do this? Fuck me. This is boring.
Left is trying to dismantle America and rebuild it in their own image by using the art of deception, and words and definitions are their weapon of choice. Remember, words change culture. Bethany.
Right. The left is doing that, you know? Definitely not us, who are literally filming an instructional video about how we're going to have a bunch of pre-selected political sycophants imported into the regulatory state to enforce our agenda.
With your extensive experience with both domestic and international policy issues, and in light of your role in leadership positions at USAID, can you walk us through some examples of how the left uses words, weaponizes really, words and definitions? And if you could do that in a context of the cross-cutting issues that are identified in the mandate.
Again, no examples of the right weaponizing words, you know? Like when they call migrants coming in through the southern border an invasion, you know? That's not using like inflammatory language or weaponizing words, you know? I know when we say invasion, you usually think of like an army invading somewhere, not migrants, but we're just telling it like it is, you know?
For leadership, and really, as we understand, the cross-cutting issues were identified because they are the pillars of the Biden administration. And so they've been layered into virtually every document in the federal government. If you could walk us through some of those examples, I think it would be incredibly helpful.
I'd be happy to. Absolutely. The 5 topic areas for today's discussion are centered on women, children, and family, environment, human rights and border security, the gender cult, and equity. The first topic, women, children, and family. I worked on international issues and very closely followed the language presented at the United Nations. And I saw up close and personal how this indeed is true. Language is used to control culture. I'll never forget a conversation I had with the chief of staff at USAID. We are trying to provide alternative language for the highly controversial phrase comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE, which at the United Nations had come to mean not just typical sex education, but instead had been morphed into teaching and normalizing sex at very early ages, even as young as preschool, and for girls who became pregnant, that abortion was a preferable method of birth control.
Yeah. So, you know, that sex education, you know, doesn't prevent any early pregnancies. Of course, these people don't care about that, right? Like, they think you should be popping them out young anyways. But it is funny how they think that, like, you know, sex education, which is the most effective tool for preventing, like, sexual crimes on children, right? Because then the kids know what's happening. Like, they know what's going on. They can say no. They can run. They can whatever. This is just an empirical reality. There's been tons of research done on this, right? So these people, you know, they call, you know, gay public school teachers groomers, you know, and they're groomers for having books with whatever LGBTQ characters in them at the school. But of course, you know, they don't actually give a shit about that, because if they did, they would want sex education and they'd be protesting their fucking churches because, you know, that's like the kid is however many times more likely to have like a sexual assault happen there, to be groomed there, than they are at a public school. But of course they're not, because they don't actually care about that, right? What they care about is using that, the grooming and all of this, as a proxy to make sure, LGBTQ people know their proper place, which is kind of nowhere, right? Just socially exiled.
Back to the conversation with the chief of staff. He suggested several alternatives, but each time I told him that, unfortunately, his recommended edit was also interpreted as CSE. Frustrated, he vented, "They have literally co-opted the English language." And it was at that moment that I realized that the progressive left is controlling the language, redefining definitions, and by doing so, are ruling the world. On a positive note, despite...
Wait, so okay, I'm not tracking, guys. So the left is controlling the world because they expanded in a technical sense, like on a policy level, not like just how the word is used in regular regular conversation, but on like a technical policy definition, sex ed to mean to be taught younger, and that if you don't want a kid when you're a teenager, you should get an abortion. I'm not tracking. I'm not following.
All the angst that we did succeed on that negotiation. DevEx published an article with the headline, "No Mention of Reproductive Rights in Declarations Out of G7 Development Ministerial." You can read...
Oh. So she's mad about reproductive rights being used to mean the right to have an abortion. I don't see how that's nefarious. That's seems like just an accurate thing to call the right to have an abortion, reproductive rights, alliteration. They're not pretending like it's something else.
More about this in the course materials section. Now, let's talk about the word abortion. The left got very creative years ago and started using different words to make abortion sound a little less like murder. For example, sexual and reproductive health, reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health services, reproductive health services, sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights.
Make abortion sound a little bit less like murder. Health services. What does that have to do with, were they secretly using health these are all things that are just related to abortion. These are just different ways to describe things that abortion is a part of, I don't know what the problem. I'm unclear about what the gripe is here. These all seem to just be things that are related to... These all seem to be medical terminology for things that include abortion. Right? It's not like people don't understand when you say reproductive rights that you mean abortion, right? Like it's not like a secret, you know? Health services. So like anytime you say health services, you're like secretly insinuating that you mean abortion, or do you just mean, yeah, health services, which includes abortion? It is hilarious too. They're like, the left are using language. The left is using language in a dishonest, inflammatory way to push through their agenda. Also, abortion and murder are the same thing, and there are no reasons why we might think that they're not the same thing.
Sexual and reproductive health and rights. All of these include abortion. For years, we knew that the terms
Yeah. What is... Yes, they do. So what? Like, where's the manipulation of language, you know? Does anybody who supports the right to abortion claim that any of these things don't include abortion?
That I just mentioned had been used and that they were code for abortion. The left and the Courier...
Again, were they code for abortion, or are they things that include abortion? Like, that's not code. That's just like a broader term that includes this other thing.
Bureaucrats at state and USAID told us, oh, no. But then when I was negotiating with Canada for the G7 Development Ministerial, I said, well, can we just use these terms and add that does not include abortion? And their response was telling. They said, but it does include abortion.
Yeah. What the fuck is happening? Yes, people that support abortion think that health services should include yes. Where's the shadowy, nefarious use of language? I don't know. Nobody denies this. Like, this isn't a secret, you know? Yes, people that support abortion use these terms and assume that abortion should be included as part of health. I don't understand. Like, she tells this story as if it's like she's uncovered like a secret cabal of people who, you know, fucking are using code word for abortion. And then she's like, and then he told me, but they do include abortion. And she's like, that's telling. It's like, no, it's not telling. Like, everybody knows this. Yes, everybody that supports women's right to get an abortion thinks that it's a health service. Yes. You didn't uncover any. Yes. No, nobody denies this.
Even with that admission, I had a difficult time convincing political appointees that these terms were co-opted.
Yeah, it's because they weren't fucking co-opted. They all already agree with you that they include they're not co-opted.
Another example hits closer to home and highlights how imperative it is for political appointees to ensure definitions are correct and explicitly followed. 3 days after President Trump took office on January 20th, 2017, he issued a presidential memorandum regarding the Mexico City policy. This became known as the Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance Policy, or the expanded Mexico City policy. When I arrived at USAID in June 2017, I was the first political appointee in a bureau outside the front office and the sixth political appointee in the building. Despite President Trump issuing a presidential memorandum at the very onset of his administration to immediately change course and to protect life, even months later, his guidance was ignored. I remember hearing careers refer to this policy and even seeing documents that referred to it as the global gag order. I immediately told the career staff that we do not refer to it as the global gag order, but instead appropriately as the protecting life and global health assistance policy. To some, it may seem inconsequential, but it actually was completely undermining the president and the American people who...
Wait. Yeah. That's because you're a political appointee, but like health service, the health administrations aren't supposed to be political employees, right? They're supposed to be health service administrative workers. They're not supposed to, they're not supposed to go, oh, all hail the king, he's issued this policy, therefore, whatever the God King says goes. They're not political agencies. So yes, you think that because you were a political appointee, you were appointed to be a sycophant to the Trump administration, but that's not the job of these agencies. It's not supposed to be.
Who had elected President Trump. So opposed to this policy change, the left actually started a new organization and an international movement called She Decides, which invited NGOs and other foreign governments to join and actively promote abortion services and advocacy, essentially joining together to try to counter what the Trump administration was doing to protect life.
God, I'm so glad that these videos came out, because as we know, her position on abortion is shared by most of the American public, It's a very popular position to have, to be openly advocating that, the administration appoints a bunch of political actors to federal agencies so that they can tell women whether or not they can have an abortion. We know that that's a very popular thing with the American public. I'm sure that will help Trump in this election.
Language matters.
Bethany, it's incredible how the left is able to make killing children and babies a pro movement. I mean, again, the left is misusing language, they're so bad about how they use language. Abortion is killing babies. It's the same thing. Definitely not me using ridiculously inflammatory language about something that is obviously not the same thing as killing babies, Because of course, if you ask most people, if you kill a baby, what we know to be a baby, which is the thing that is born, versus a zygote, people will just intuit that to be the same thing. It's not me using inflammatory language. Everybody agrees with this. And their narrative is just incredible and so opposite of what the reality of the situation is. We see that also with environment, right? So I remember when I was in school.
Oh God. Are we going to do, actually, it was cold this winter, therefore climate change doesn't exist? Something tells me that's coming.
in elementary school, we were taught that we were all going to be frozen over by an ice age. And of course, this was terrifying. And then in the 80s, it was acid rain. We were all going to die from the acid rain. And then,
I don't know if they said you were all going to die, but that did actually exist. The acid rain, because of the fucking chemicals we were putting in to the atmosphere. And then a bunch of countries decided we should not have acid rain, and we got rid of it.
Then it moved to global warming, which I think, most of the people watching this tape will remember. That was during the Obama administration.
Yes.
And then science comes along and disproves the global warming theory.
Literally the opposite is true, right? Like, it couldn't, this is as the opposite is true as you can get, right? It's like 99% agreement amongst climate scientists that climate change is happening, It's not disputable. I mean, you could dispute it, but you'd be wrong. Like, it's about as much of an empirical scientific reality as you can get, right? It's, yeah.
In large part, and we have one of the most frigid winters ever known. And then...
Oh, there it is. Yep. There it is. Climate change doesn't exist because we had a winter, Because climate and weather are the same thing, obviously. Climate, a general warming trend in the climate can't actually make winters be worse. That can't happen. Guys, did you know that it's not 120 degrees outside all the time? The weather would indicate that the climate isn't changing.
The next thing you know, they're calling it climate change. Now, I always understood that climate change meant...
Yeah. Because fucking... By the way, she says this happened during the Obama administration. Well, no. We've known about this since, like, the 70s. But, of course, the incredibly powerful fossil fuel industry, which gives lots of money to organizations like the Heritage Foundation and candidates like Donald Trump to push their agenda and publish, fake studies denying the science of climate change. They shoved it down for as long as they could. They changed the name not because they're deceiving about what's actually happening, like the thing we have all this scientific evidence for, but because people like this were so easily confused, by the propaganda of the fossil fuel industry, that they're like, right, how could the globe be warming if we had a cold winter this year? So they started calling it climate change so that people would be less confused about what was actually happening. And apparently for these two, it didn't work. But
and seasons, our climate does change all the time.
Oh my God. Hey guys, did you know? We don't have a perma summer. We still get seasons. Climate change debunked. It's painful.
But of course, that's not what's meant by the left. What do you think about...
No, it's not meant by anybody who hasn't been gobbling up right-wing demagogue propaganda on this issue, including the people who dedicate their life to studying it. Yeah, no, it's not. That's not what it's meant, because climate and weather aren't the same fucking thing.
all of about the left's words and definitions in the environment.
It's a great point, Katie. They don't stop. Climate change, allegedly, is everywhere. And if the American people...
Yeah, it's yes, we all live on the same planet. Yes, the climate changing does affect everywhere. That is true, yeah.
elect a conservative president, his administration will have to eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere. And according to our intelligence community, the number one threat facing our country today is, drumroll, climate change. Not Russia, not China, not AI, climate change.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a death cult, right? Like, this is, like when Chomsky goes like, yeah, the most dangerous organization on the planet is the Republican Party. And people think he's joking, but he's like, yeah, because they're willing to just plummet human civilization into collapse in order to preserve the interests of wealthy fossil fuel companies. He's not wrong. But also, yes, because the climate change is happening. It's happening. The evidence is in dispute. It's happening, right? There's just no way to make a good argument against it happening because of the metric fuck tons of evidence we have that it's happening. And if we don't do anything about it, it's gonna be bad, you, ma'am, say you want to protect life. Well, you're not doing a very good job of it, because if we don't do anything about the climate change, a lot of life is gonna be lost, That's the reality. And those other things you mentioned have the potential to be very dangerous, but they're not happening right now. AI is not AI. It's language it's not intelligent, It's not there yet. It's regurgitating a data set. Russia could nuke the United States, but as of right now, that's not happening. So the one thing that is for sure happening is the climate change. So yes, right now it is more pertinent, I would say. And there are some, pretty basic things we could do to end the threat of nuclear war and or AI, by coming to some sort of a fair resolution in Ukraine and regulating the AI companies, which of course she's not probably in favor of doing, but those are much smaller undertakings than what we have to do to transfer to renewable energy. It can be done. We can do it, and we can do it if we do it the right way, without sacrificing people's standard of living. But
this shows how the federal government is all in on this issue, and climate change activists wield a lot of power. This is an issue to pay attention to.
Really? Do we? Because it doesn't seem like it. Because, basically, we've had 4 years of President Biden, who people like this would tell you is, going to use climate change to, institute, global communism. And yet, very little has been done during this administration, It's all been done through private sector subsidies, not much public sector development. If climate activists wield so much power, they must be lazy. They're not getting a lot done.
as it has infiltrated every part of the federal government. Now, when I think of climate change, I immediately think of population control, don't you? I think about...
No, I don't. Where are the climate activists saying that the problem is the population? You know, maybe some of them exist. They're like eco-fascists or whatever. I'm sure, you know, they exist. But the overwhelming majority of people who believe this is happening, which is the overwhelming majority of people, because people can, like, you know, use their critical thinking skills and go like, this seems highly likely. Don't mention the population really at all. Like, that's not really the problem. Population. Like, the problem is the greenhouse gases. You know, that's what needs to be fixed, not the population numbers. We could, like, halt the population numbers right now, and it wouldn't fix the problem, right? So I'm confused about why you would automatically think about population control. It's almost like you don't, but you're using this as a way to fearmonger people into supporting reactionary political candidates.
The people who don't want you to have children because of the impact on the environment. Perhaps not everyone will make that connection, but after spending time in the international space trying to protect life, I can tell you that this is part of their ultimate goal, to control people. Let me share a personal example of how the left seeks to permeate every dimension of life through their skewed terminology and definition.
Hey guys, I can tell you this for sure because I have so much experience, you know, working in the public sector. How am I going to prove it to you? A personal anecdote with no additional evidence to verify that what I'm about to say happened. Just uncritically buy it, you know, you take my word for it.
When I arrived at USAID, I had a career employee ask me how many children I had. I thought it was a bit odd of a question, but to be kind, I answered, and I said I had 3 children. And he actually said to me, "Oh, wow, 1.5 too many for the environment." I smiled.
Yeah, that didn't fucking happen, right? Is it possible that that happened? Sure. Does it seem likely? No. Did the way she delivered that feel convincing to you? No. I'm gonna, you know, use my best judgment here and say that that didn't happen.
Smiled, and I said very politely, if I could have 10 more children, I would. The policy book captures the essence of climate change. And I quote, "In the name of combating climate change, policies have been used to create an artificial energy scarcity that will require trillions of dollars in new investment, supported with taxpayer subsidies to address a problem that government and special interests themselves have created."
Yeah, no. The problem, first of all, we don't have an artificial energy scarcity. The U.S. is producing the most domestic oil it's ever produced in its history right now. Again, you know, you'd think if the climate change activists were so powerful, they would have convinced Biden to invest in more renewable energy rather than doing that. But the reality is, we're producing a fuck ton of domestic oil right now. Also, the problem wasn't created, even if this were true, that they created an artificial scarcity. Right, but the problem with the climate change is the climate change, not the scarcity of energy, right? So that's not a problem that the government created necessarily. It is mainly a problem of the private sector. the private sector is responsible, like large corporations are responsible for the overwhelming majority of greenhouse gas emissions. That's true. And yes, like in order to prevent the worst outcomes from that, you will have subsidies. Subsidies are one way to encourage renewable development. That's true, yeah.
To address a problem that government and special interests themselves have created.
Yeah, special interests, Of course, again, the special interests of the fossil fuel companies, no special no special interest or regulatory capture or election scale tipping or outsized consolidation of power there, It's the crazy powerful, extremely wealthy, but also communist green energy activists.
364. End of quote. Population growth, environmental changes, and weather patterns have all been intertwined by the left. They take or even make up a term and create, extend, and alter the definition to validate whatever ideology or position they want to ingrain and convince others is good, when in reality it's not.
Of course, the opposite is the case, right? Like, if any side is the most guilty, of course, both sides produce propaganda, right? But the side that is the most consistent about, using language in ways that are especially politically motivated, that would be the right, Because what they're basically doing here is like, you need to use language in the limited way that we say is okay. And that's it, And we're going to use the power of the state to enforce the use of language that we say is okay. And we're not going to have any debates about conceptual categories. We're not going to expand the use of words where it fits. We're not going to do any of that. We get to use language in inflammatory ways to stoke, to like diminish like reasoned debate about concepts. We get to do that. And we also get to use it in inflammatory ways to create fear and moral panic to drive support for our preferred political candidates. But the left, when the left uses like the reproductive rights to mean also included abortion, that's actually the Marxist, communist, socialist cabal taking over the world.
Just heard, they are simply not coherent or logical. Remember, our intelligence community,
unlike these two who have been totally logically consistent and, adherent to evidence and definitely not like sensationalist and irrational during this entire video,
identified climate change as the #1 threat to America. So even if you do not work at the Department of Energy, no matter where you work, because of the Biden administration's executive orders and policy priorities, you will have to look for climate change language and get rid of it.
Bethany, when you were talking about how the left has co-opted so many words and weaponized so many words when it comes to abortion, and that's something that, political appointees in the next administration are going to have to really look at, this idea that it's a right. There's many phrases that included rights. Is there other places where rights are used as a catch-all and it means something else?
Katie, that's a great question. And in fact, #3 is human rights. Human rights in border security. So, rights, rights, rights. The left is always coming up with new rights. In the Trump administration,
rights are based. I happen to think rights are based, you know? I don't know about these two. My guess is they're pretty selective about which and who gets rights, if they care about, like, rights at all, but...
we countered human rights with unalienable rights. The careers went absolutely crazy at USA.
Right. Well, those are related things, but not necessarily the same, right? Like, this would be an instance where you guys are fear-mongering about how the left is, like, weaponizing language. And yet, another instance where, no, they're just using two different words to mean things that mean different shit, you know? Like, inalienable rights are rights that are, like, can't be taken away, and everybody has them just by virtue of being a human. And human rights are related to that, but are rights that all humans have, you know. They're related, but different connotations, right?
ID. But thankfully, President Trump had established a commission on unalienable rights at the State Department, and we would just point back to the commission. Sadly, our founding documents were not sufficient, but thankfully the commission was. The Department of State's Commission on Unalienable Rights was charged with providing the U.S. government with advice on human rights grounded in our nation's founding principles and the principles of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Right. Yeah. Wait, but she just did it. She said human rights instead of whatever.
Right. Now, I'm going to turn over border security to you, Katie, as it deals with legalese.
And we all know that border security is a major issue, and the differences between a conservative presidency and administration and the current administration couldn't be more stark than in this area. So getting the words very precise.
Is that true? Because Biden, for most of his presidency, just kept Trump's border policies all in place. And then repealed Title 42. And then just recently signed an executive order that, like, cracks down on asylum seekers, which was the conservative proposed border policy, but that they shot down because Trump told them to, or else he wouldn't be able to, like, fearmonger people into voting for him by saying that they're poisoning the blood of our nation and shit like that, you know? So, like, is it the case that they're that much different? I would prefer them to be more different, you know? But, yeah, that's an interesting claim.
Precise and correct is crucial. The left has co-opted language and definitions as it relates to immigration. Illegal immigration is one of the most devastating challenges America faces today, particularly when you factor in all of the secondary costs and effects of illegal immigration, including illicit drug and human trafficking.
Nine out of 10 drug seizures at the border happen at legal points of entry. Which would make sense, because people going through legal ports of entry are much less likely to be searched. And people crossing over illegally are crossing over illegally. So they're trying to keep their head down and get here and find some kind of a job, you know?
The left knows the American people oppose illegal immigration and understands its effects. So they have spent years
Well, what are the effects? Are they the effects that you claim? Are we going to present any evidence for the effects that you claim it has, or we're just going to keep making claims here, Totally logical, deductively valid claims.
Using language designed to both inflate the illegal immigration and legal immigration, the latter of which most Americans support, and soften the idea that illegal immigration is, in fact, illegal. It is a good bet that the left has focused group tested the language it uses to cover up the horrors of illegal immigration. For example, when describing illegal immigration, the left likes to use words and phrases like undocumented immigrants and migrants. These terms.
Yeah. That's just true. Like, if they came here and they applied for asylum, which most of them do, and then they're waiting for their asylum claim to be processed, then that's a legal... Like, they've done what they were supposed to do legally in that situation. So it wouldn't make sense to call them illegal because they aren't. They've claimed asylum. So now they're undocumented, Seems like a more accurate way to use the term.
Terms are designed to sound softer and take the edge.
Also, she said migrants. Like, that's not how they did migrate, I don't know how that's, like, an inaccurate, like, what? Guys, if somebody migrated, and you call them a migrant, and you don't, like, have to put the, like, illegal, in front of it, that's actually you being, like, a Marxist and deceptively using language in the wrong way, even though I'm advocating that we use illegal immigrants to describe people who have legally filed for asylum and don't have documents.
Off the fact that these people are illegally in the United States. It is important to note that they specifically avoid using the word alien, which is the terminology used in federal law. To be clear, alien is not a negative or pejorative term. It is a legal term of art.
Come on, guys. Come on. If that was true, you wouldn't insist on using it for people who have legally claimed asylum.
Simply means that an individual is not a citizen of a particular country. Language matters here for a lot of reasons, but primarily because citizens of the United States have rights that others, including foreign nationals who are illegally on our soil, do not. If I had to guess, I would say...
And there it is, right? This is why they have a problem with the term human rights. Because they don't actually believe in, like, universal human rights, This is how, like, you see the authoritarian tendencies come out, because they don't actually believe that human rights should apply to all humans. To them, human rights should only apply to people who we think are, like, real humans, But to these people, they don't have rights, because they're not the right kind of human, right? This is why, like, when these people go on and on about how we're protecting the Constitution and we're protecting the rights of Americans and all this shit, it's always bullshit because they don't even apply that consistently to people who aren't American citizens. Like, they don't even actually believe in human rights, which is why they will work to strip rights of American citizens, because they don't have a principled stance on universal human rights. To them, like, human rights are things that can be given and stripped away depending on who's following the rules of their game, right? How can you trust that you're going to apply this consistently to even Americans if you can so easily just strip any universal rights away from people who were born somewhere else? It's like, of course, they'd be willing to strip rights away from American citizens if those American citizens are deemed to be not of their preferred political persuasion, if they're deemed to be dangerous Marxist, communist, socialists, you know, they'll strip rights from them too because they don't actually principally believe in human rights. They believe people who are of the higher orders should have rights, and people who are less fortunate shouldn't.
Say that the left's attempt to wash away the term alien stems from their disdain of actual law, since they want to avoid discussion of what federal immigration law actually requires, which is everything they refuse to do. And
again, if they've applied for asylum, they're undocumented. This is an hour long. Yeah, I'm not watching this whole thing, guys. Sorry.
With biological sex. The next issue under gender is pronouns. Don't fall into the progressive left's trap in regard to pronouns. Don't use them in email signature blocks, on LinkedIn, and absolutely do not ask people what their pronouns are on your phone.
Guys, don't use pronouns in emails, you know? Don't use pronouns. Don't use he, him, her, she, them in your emails. Write emails without using pronouns, you know? Be so transphobic that you refuse to use, like, this essential aspect of language. That's how we're gonna defeat the woke agenda. Just actually, better yet, invent an entirely new language, you know? It's going to be really hard to not use pronouns because, like, languages don't work that well without them. But, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not watching this whole 49 minutes. I can't. It's so boring, right? I really wish they could have got somebody a little bit, some people with a little bit more fire to do this, you know? I get it, it's like a training video, but damn. They're so boring, you know? I at least want my, like, reactionaries to be, like, you know, fiery, passionate advocates of the cause, right? I want them to, you know, show a little bit of enthusiasm. These women are just glazed eyes, you know, just glossy-eyed, just reading off a teleprompter. Yeah, let's do something else.